anyways, I started cold emailing into the world of Hollywood and ended up doing social media for some larger celebrities. We were also running Pitbull's account. And the interesting thing was that he would naturally just get a lot of hate for being Pitbull. But when we would reply, the engagement goes through the roof. People were like, whoa, he replied, or like, whoa, he saw that, he engaged with that. Within basically 2 weeks, he grew 1 million followers because all we were doing was replying. And that's essentially how you work with creators. But I think brands don't cold email creators enough. And creators are really the ones today that hold a lot of the power.
Q4 is the busiest time of year for e-commerce brands. And if there's one thing that rings true year in and year out, so you have to get your shoppers' attention quickly. SMS makes it easier than ever to connect with customers through their phones. Trusted by brands like Brooklinen, Native, Fanjoy, and more, Postscript is the go-to text message marketing platform for brands on Shopify and Shopify Plus. Learn more and get started with a free 30-day trial at postscript.io. Welcome to another week's episode of the Messenger Mastermind podcast. As always, I am your host, Jeremy Horowitz, and today I'm very excited about our awesome guest that Postscript has been so thoughtful to set us up with. Someone who we've been trying to get on the show since the preview book that we were both in actually quite some time ago. So I'm not going to ramble on anymore. Let me introduce the founder of Sharma Brands, Nik Sharma. Nik, how's it going?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me. I'm glad Postscript was able to set us up.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the conversation today. I feel like just from seeing what you're doing on Twitter, seeing some of the things you've released, I feel we're going to get some really interesting conversation. So knowing that we're right in that crunch time right before holiday, I want to just kick it off on a hot topic. What's your number one tip for brands going into this holiday season?
Oh, man. Well, it's the Super Bowl, right? So for all of us marketers and merchants, I like to say we're in the playoffs right now. We are, with the Black Friday being Super Bowl, I like to say that leading up to Black Friday, it's the perfect time to build your audiences. It's the perfect time to nurture those audiences and essentially make sure that when it comes time for these consumers to start spending on what they want to buy, you have something there that's of interest, and you also have a big warm audience to pull from.
Okay, very cool. What audiences? Like, what would you recommend? What channels would you recommend? I feel like this is the year that everybody is testing something new just because of all of the problems they've had on Facebook. So is there anything you've seen really stand out?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think Facebook audiences are an easy one, right? Like running things like video view campaigns, running messenger campaigns where you now have an addressable audience for about a year. But also things like building up an email list, whether that's through sweepstakes, whether that's through partnerships with other brands, building an SMS list, whether that's through exclusive drops or exclusive merchandising through influencers or other audiences that can drive into SMS. And also just, there's different things you can do tactically. Like one thing we love to do is create a Facebook event for Black Friday because you can easily drive people there. Facebook allows you to create custom audiences off of events, but also run ads to events. And also then on the day of, drop a push notification. So we're definitely fans of building audiences across as many channels as you can. If you have the bandwidth, I think it's important to also build audiences across things like programmatic, across things like Pinterest, even Snapchat, TikTok is a big one this year. So I would say in as many places as you can, email subscribers from a content standpoint, not just a promotional aspect, is another big one. So I think building audiences in as many places as possible gives you the best possible at bat when it comes around to Black Friday, and your goal is to generate as much sales as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, there's a couple pieces I want to pick out from there, but one thing I just want to dive into because I feel like we talk about this all the time and I'm blue in the face preaching channel diversity, and some people listen, some people don't. So can you just go into like your philosophy, the philosophy that you roll into your brands of why that's so important to have all those audiences in all those different places?
Yeah, I mean, I think this year was a great example with the iOS 14 and 15 updates, right? Almost immediately, there were brands that went from having like a 6 to an 8 ROAS overnight dropped to a 2 to 3 ROAS. And while they might still make the revenue on the back end, what it does is it makes that channel now less dependent to go and push cash on. So the things, the example really just shows that overnight, a platform can have a change, which you have absolutely no control of. And you just lose out on the potential there. And if your business projections, which a lot of companies did have, were so reliant on Facebook ads working properly and really just one channel working for you, the second that platform decides to make a change or is forced to make a change, you almost lose out on, really your whole year's projections. That's why I think it's so important to not only focus on, like I call Facebook, well, Facebook is obviously paid, but then there's social channels, which I think are more like leased or rented audiences. You're still in the power of, or in the control of them. I think that the future is basically, first and zero party audience data, which is essentially first party audience data is your own CRM list, your own email list, SMS list, et cetera. But then the zero party is kind of a layer on top, which allows you to go and do what Facebook does, which is add attributes to each customer or each record or each persona and understand on a deeper level out of your list, how can you segment that in 64 or 100 different ways?
Yeah, definitely. And you brought up content earlier as a way to keep email engaged. And I mean, really you can do it across any channel. So how are you thinking about tying those custom attributes, those first and zero party data into those channels to just have that better, more personalized touch?
So there's a couple ways to do it. One is basically kind of like automatic segmenting based on what consumers are buying. So whether it's based off of, if you're a multi-category brand or a multi-category, or a multi-variant type of brand in the sense that you have different scents, colors, flavors, et cetera. There's different ways to just automatically apply tags or filters to those customers. The other way is think something as simple as just running surveys or running quizzes on your site. And as these customers go through these flows, you're able to attach attributes back to their customer profiles, which then, when you decide to run a Black Friday sale, you might run like 7 different sales that, the customer might only see one, but you might be running 7 behind the scenes, each one targeting a different segment of customers, because that, again, if you message a lot more closely to what that customer is into, you give yourself a better possible chance to convert that customer at a higher AOV or at a higher UPT, units per transaction. That's better for your business in turn.
Yeah. Okay. You're the first person that I've ever heard or talk about on this podcast, or anyone's I've been also, who's mentioned UPT. I just want to dive into it because I think it's so important. And I think I feel like everybody learns that the hard way because there's no school for ecom. Although I did when I interviewed with Seam from Postscript, apparently there is now a program in Ireland. So now I have to edit myself every time I say that. But where did you discover UPT? How do you think about it now? How does it weave into your strategy? Because I feel like the people that know about it get it, but everybody who hasn't heard of it before isn't familiar with it and isn't familiar with how powerful it could be for a business.
Yeah, so UPT is actually kind of like an old school retail term, or maybe like retail wholesale brand term, and it's a term that they really try to use. They use two things that we don't really use in ecom. One is UPT, which is units per transaction, and the second one is MER, which is media efficiency ratio. And MER is essentially a macro view of ROAS, right? So when we talk about ROAS in ecom, we're usually looking at one source of distribution, which is usually the .com or the Shopify site. And we pair it back to a channel that we're running ads on. And so we can say, all right, the Facebook ROAS is this, or, our macro ROAS is this. But with brands like a Kate Spade, for example, they have tons of stores, tons of distribution outlets. They have 2 or 3 different websites, whether it's the katespade.com or their Kate Spade Surprise website. They're essentially looking at them, and they're also running things like billboards and taxi ads and radio ads, satellite radio, TV, like every possible channel, because it's just such an iconic brand. They're looking at trying to understand, all right, based on these different distribution points, what are we seeing from a UPT standpoint? Meaning, are we seeing that customers who come in through e-commerce are driving more revenue than the average customer who comes in through retail, and vice versa? And how does that affect the business? And why do certain customers buy more units in store versus they buy online? And then the other one is the MER, which is essentially a macro view across all the business, understanding, all right, the ad dollars that we're putting in, what is that doing to drive revenue, and how does that correlate over time?
Yeah, definitely. So did you work at a retail heavy brand where you learned all that? Because that's exactly what happened to me. I was at a brand called Lumi. We were very retail heavy, and our CEO and CFO were had very heavy retail backgrounds. So that's where I learned about that. Did you have a similar experience?
No, just from kind of conversation with friends who work in retail. We also, on the Sharma brand side, we work with a ton of like Fortune 50 companies. And so just kind of learning their terminology as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like Robin Hooding, like taking from the old school, bringing it to the new startups.
Exactly.
So I realized I jumped so deep in that we never actually got into your background at all. So I want to take it a step back. My producer's going to fire me. Is How'd you get into this crazy game of ecom?
So it's a funny story. I was in high school and just a horrible student. I got wind of this concept of organic social media being a thing that was so fascinating to me because of this guy named Jesse Pujji, who actually started Ampush, which is a massive media agency. And so Jesse was my neighbor when I was growing up, and he would come over, and this was like early days of Ampush. He was always talking about Facebook and social media, and I got more interested on the organic side and thought, all right, it would be cool to maybe do some contract work. And I was probably in 10th grade at this point, where I could do some organic social. And so I started working with a few different mom and pop shops, like local shops. Realized it was fun, but it wasn't like that fun. And I just started cold emailing. I used to also DJ in high school, so I was pretty good at cold emailing to get DJ gigs. And anyways, I started cold emailing into the world of Hollywood and ended up doing social media for some larger celebrities, which was really fun. After that, high school kind of finished. I didn't really get into any crazy good colleges. And I found this internship opportunity in San Francisco at an ad tech company. So I flew up to San Francisco and joined this company. I was supposed to intern just for the summer. I ended up staying there for about a year and a half and kind of got very deep into the world of paid media, programmatic media, CPMs, bidding, optimization, like everything in the world of ad tech, specifically programmatic and in paid social. By the time I kind of finished my tenure at that company, I was working with all these publishers to basically help them. They were all the publishers that advertise at the bottom of Taboola and Outbrain, those, you won't believe what happened to this celebrity 27 years later. And their whole goal was basically, can they spend $100,000 a day on Taboola, get a 2-cent click, make 4 cents by the time somebody goes through 7 or 8 slides in a slideshow, and basically just try to arbitrage and make 2 cents per user, but at scale of $100,000, $200,000 a day and spend. And so I basically went to these publishers and said, I can run your Facebook ads and do the same thing, because they had never really run on Facebook because, it was a little more complicated back then. And so I just basically started freelancing and doing media buying for a lot of these publishers. Eventually Facebook caught on and started to ban clickbait. But while they didn't, it was great.
Good old days,
and
yeah.
yeah. So when they started to kind of catch on and ban clickbait, essentially, I realized I needed to start, shifting away from publishers and take my skill set of this media buying that I'd done and move it over to the brand side. And so I joined a company called Hintwater as their director of performance marketing. And basically I was tasked there to just acquire customers. And so, I got there and I'm looking at the Facebook dashboard and I'm thinking, all right, these guys are paying a lot of money per click. I was getting 2-cent, 3-cent clicks to this content on Facebook. Why are they paying $2 or $3 per click? And so around the same time, I'd hit up a friend who had just joined The Hustle. And his name is Scott Swanson. He was like number 3 at The Hustle. And, we did this deal where basically The Hustle wrote a very engaging piece of content for the founder story. And it was a very engaging piece in the sense that it was clearly written. It told the founder story in a very concise way. It was short and sweet. It wasn't too long. It was a very shareable piece of content. And so we started running that overnight. We went from, doing like 80 customers a day to 1,000 new customers a day, 2,000, 3,000, up to 5,000 new customers a day. And anyways, the business just ended up taking off. I ended up being there for about 2 years and then moved out to New York, joined an agency, kind of realized that the agency life was not my shtick. I really loved getting my hands dirty and like rolling up my sleeves and working on the strategy, but also working on the execution, kind of like how I was at Hint. And so I started consulting just on the side, working with brands like Cha Cha Matcha or Super Coffee or Rock Nation, The Pill Club, and realized that the consulting thing was cool because I could come in and kind of name a strategy, but at the same time, they were down to do it. And then when they would do it, they'd make a lot of money and everybody was happy. And so what started as basically just me consulting out of my apartment, ended up becoming Sharma Brands, which is essentially now a consulting firm where we work with companies from, Fortune 50 alcohol brands to, the next big startup brand like a Judy or a Sprit Society or a Caraway. And we basically help these brands, essentially grow and overcome any kind of speed bumps or roadblocks they have. But we also do the execution as well. And that's what I'm doing today.
Very cool. Okay, so what did managing celebrities' social media accounts teach you about creating buzz for a brand? I actually am very interested in that.
Yeah. So the biggest thing was that when I started doing it, it was, social was very much a broadcast platform. It was a platform where, Priyanka Chopra was going on Kiss FM. And so I would make a graphic in Photoshop and put it up and basically tell her fans, hey, tune into the show on the radio because she's going to do that. And she's going to talk and be on air. And what I found interesting was, we were also running Pitbull's account. And the interesting thing was that, he would naturally just get a lot of hate for being Pitbull. And
still does,
when
surprisingly.
Yeah, but when we would reply, the engagement goes through the roof. And people were like, whoa, he replied, or like, whoa, he saw that, he engaged with that. And there was a period of time where, within basically 2 weeks, he grew 1 million followers because all we were doing was replying. And as a result, people were like, whoa, maybe now if I tweet him, I have a chance at getting a reply. And that's all they wanted. And so basically the biggest learning at that time, and this was back when like Instagram wasn't even a thing. It was like Facebook pages and Twitter accounts. The biggest learning was basically like social is a two-way street, right? It's not just a broadcast platform. And if it is, it's not going to stay growing or it's not going to stay high in engagement. The engagement will die over time. You have to turn it into a two-way platform. And, when I think about like running ads for brands today, like even at Hint, when we were running ads, like we treated it the same way. Every single ad that we had, every single comment we got on an ad had a reply almost instantly within 24 hours. And what that did for the ads themselves was pretty crazy. I mean, it kept the CPMs low, it kept the engagement rate high, it kept the page engagement rate high, which kept the overall, quality score for the page really high. So there was a lot of elements that I learned in social about it being a two-way street that paid off heavily when it came to the ad side. And I think a lot of people tend to forget that, like, even though an ad shows up on social, it still is social at the end of the day, right? Like, somebody might see a sponsored badge or they might not, but at the end of the day, it's still showing up in the feed as if it was a normal post.
Right. And the best ones, nobody actually notices that it is
it's an ad.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. The best ads. Yeah, exactly. The best ads you don't think are ads.
So, I mean, with your wide variety, how do you actually scale that so that, I think it's fairly easy to respond when you have like a small dedicated team. You're not doing thousands of orders a day, but when you're doing thousands, tens of thousands of orders, how are you either programmatically or a team actually managing that to keep that going? Just knowing that like everybody's on multiple channels, everybody's a little all over the place.
Yeah. So, at Hint initially, I had hired a community manager, and it wasn't the traditional community. It wasn't community manager in the traditional sense. It was more like the job was literally responding to comments all day long. Every single ad comment had to be responded to. Today, I think brands kind of rope that into customer service, which is great. But I think that like even now when we run ads for companies, like we make sure that every single ad comment we have gets a response, even to the point of like if somebody needs help, we'll walk them through how to place an order on the site, simply because it just makes it, like today, when somebody buys from a brand today, they're buying the brand. They're not really just buying the toothpaste or the product, right? Because they can go buy that product from really 7 to 10 other brands almost easily. But if you interact with them in a way that's different than what other brands would do, that's something they remember. And when they run out of that product, they're not just going to go to CVS or 7-Eleven and pick up the competitor. They're going to wait for your brand's version to come back. So I would say today, like, it's a matter of just scaling up resources when you need it. If you have tens of thousands of orders a day, then you can certainly afford, 4 or 5 customer service agents who are solely dedicated to that. I know Glossier, for example, back from the early days, they had, 4 or 5 employees whose sole job was to just manage DMs that came through Instagram. And that's why people are so attracted to the brand and will stay lifelong fans, is because they remember, oh yeah, the serum, the vitamin C serum that's available from 35 other different companies, I'm still going to buy it from them because, they were the ones that responded to me, or they were the ones that made me feel different out of the sea of different brands.
Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting. I was just talking with Eli from Olipop, and he was saying a lot of the similar things where it's it's almost like a marketing function versus a CS function. Do you?
100%.
Okay.
100% agreed. And I think too, like marketing today does not start with the product. It starts with who is the consumer, really just understanding who the consumer is and understanding how you as a brand fit into that consumer.
Yeah, definitely. Because I do agree with you. Feel like every product is almost commoditized or will be commoditized quickly.
Totally.
And so how do you think about CLV to CAC ratio in that respect? And like, what are you doing to really get that delta where it makes sense to then go plow those investments back into things like brand?
Yeah. I mean, it's like we're always optimizing for a higher ROAS on the first purchase for that reason. Like we love to build and test high AOV bundles. That's like probably the one thing I think we're really good at doing is understanding how to increase AOV right off the bat. But at the same time, it's like a two-way thing, right? Like on one end, we're focused on optimizing creative and copy and increasing click-through rate so that the ad costs are low. On the other hand, we're also trying to make sure that, if somebody's buying like Olipop for the first time, we want to make sure that they're getting enough cans with enough flavors and enough flavors of each can, or enough cans of each flavor so that the whole household can try. And, it's all about positioning it in a way where it just at the end of the day becomes value back to the customer. But on the flip side for the brand, you're basically increasing AOV and you're maybe, you're doing things where instead of shipping 1 12-pack of Olipop, you're shipping 2 because you know that your fulfillment center's cost to ship 2 is really the same as 1, or it's 1.2 times, the cost of just shipping 1. So it's trying to optimize both sides. How can you make sure that the product that gets shipped is high AOV and stays at relatively high margin, but at the same time, on the ad side, you're trying to do everything you can there to make sure that the cost of getting a customer to the site or at least in the door stays low.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like everybody asks, how do you have that brand that takes off? And my response always is increase AOV on as many purchases as possible, especially the first one, because I feel like not a lot of brands understand, not a lot of marketers also understand the financial components of what is our CAC payback? How much margin do we actually need to make this sustainable to afford what we're spending? And so I always just like asking that question because I always think it's interesting to get different people's perspectives. So Talking about high value AOV bundles, what are you thinking in that respect for this holiday season and just in discounting in general? Like what promotions are you leaning towards and against?
So if you have the resources, which I think most of this audience does, I love to segment out promotions as much as you can. So for like Thursday, for example, on Thanksgiving Day, we're focused on our highest LTV segment of customers or the highest LTV cohort of customers in the sense that, Thursday, obviously you send out a happy Thanksgiving note, but in the evening you can hit those high LTV customers, whether they're your top 10% of spenders or your subscribers or your ambassadors or the ones that you value the most as a brand, give them the early access to the Black Friday deal, which should only run on Black Friday and maybe that Thursday evening. And I think the Black Friday deal too should be something that stays very high AOV, but you balance it with a high discount. So you're able to give 40% off, but also the AOV that you're selling this 40% off offer at is also 4 or 5 times what this person's used to normally buying. That gives you a couple things. One, if you're a consumable brand like a beverage or a scent or a food, it gives you the ability to instantly just sample throughout the holiday season. Because if somebody just got, 10 cases of Olipop, they're not keeping it in their fridge, right? They're going to be sampling it. It's going to be out at parties. It's going to be out when people come over. And that's a real thing that happens. So Friday, I'm all about the high AOV and the high discount offer. I think Saturday and Sunday are big days to push what you have maybe struggled to push. So whether it's flavors, colors, scents, textures that don't necessarily sell well, you push those on a Saturday or a Sunday. And I think you use one day for that. And I think the other day, if you have a subscription component, you try to push an offer around subscription. So, subscribe to 3 months of Olipop, get your 4th month on us. Or subscribe to Olipop and get 25% off your first month instead of 15%. But something that basically incentivizes subscription. And then come Cyber Week or Cyber Monday week, I love pushing tiered promo sales. So, you spend $100, you get 15% off, $250, you get 25% off, $400, you get 40% off. But you're essentially incentivizing somebody and gamifying the game to where they're going to want to keep putting more in the cart. And you make that obvious on the site, not only through letting them know it's a tiered promo sale, but you alter the cart to say, you're this close to getting a higher discount, or you're this close to that next level of going from 25 to 40% off. But the other thing it does too is, having different discounts on different days with different discount structures, it doesn't leave customers upset, because the one big problem that I've seen is, they'll run a Black Friday sale and then on Monday they'll run the same thing, but at a better price. And all that does is just fill up customer service inquiries. The other thing it does too is when you have a Friday sale that ends on Friday and a Saturday sale that ends on Saturday, the next year that people come back, they're going to remember, oh shit, if we don't buy this on Friday, like we're not going to get the same deal on Monday. So that's kind of how I like to think about the Black Friday, Cyber Monday holiday promos.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's essentially 3 to 4 promos if you have a subscription arm, where are you hitting the same list over again, or are you running exclusion to purchasers on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can hit the same list. The other thing that I think is super underrated is those warm audiences that you've built, which are technically still a prospecting audience because they haven't converted yet, but hitting them with those offers is where they really come in and convert. We found that for a lot of our brands, Black Friday is a huge prospecting day, driving in new customers and even just customers who've kind of engaged with the brand here or there, but haven't made that full purchase in.
Okay. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense, because I feel like most of the brands are probably e-com driven versus like old school retail driven.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. And then that first day is just all bundles. Second days are discounting and just moving stale inventory. And then, so you're running the tier discount all week, not just Monday.
All week. Yeah. All week. And on Tuesday, it's Giving Tuesday. So you can figure out a charity that aligns well with your brand and give a percentage of your proceeds back. And then Saturday too is Small Business Saturday. So I think if you're a large brand, there's definitely room to add another kind of messaging moment or PR moment of, hey, we're supporting this local business or that small business and giving back there.
Yeah, definitely. And if you are that small business, you can push that angle for yourself
exactly.
as well.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then I feel like a lot of people will also be listening to this in early December also. So what are some like tips, tactics for hitting December off right? But I think really at this point, like more of like setting yourself up for January as well.
Yeah. I mean, January is a super underrated time to sell, especially because
CPMs are so low.
The CPMs are dirt cheap. Most of the big brands pull back all their advertising on basically the 26th or the 27th. And so, it almost becomes really cheap to push, but especially if you're a brand in the health or the wellness space, or you have products that make people live better, feel better, do better, be better, that January, first 3 weeks of January is a prime time to go hard and push, because that's when people are just really looking to become the best versions of themselves. For December, depending on how much bandwidth you have or resources or inventory you have, you can do like a 25 days of Christmas leading up to Christmas, which is always usually a hit. And you can do it in a way where each week has a different theme, or each week focuses on a different vertical of products you're selling. That usually helps to attract customers, different types of customers. Obviously there's the shipping cutoff, which is, another big kind of holiday moment there to get your final orders in. And then right after the shipping cutoff, I think is when you can go hard around gift cards, digital gift cards. So creating unique experiences online where you can easily, create a moment around gift cards, whether it's you print out something fun or something arrives in somebody else's email in a fun way. I also think we're going to see some brands trying to play with NFTs around this December, November time.
It's about that time.
Yeah. And it's you can make it as complicated or as simple, right? Like I think there's a world where buying during this year's holiday season grants you an NFT, and that NFT smart contract might have, 20% off any purchase you make for the next 6 months or for the next year to come. Or it could be something as simple as just a cool piece of art that you get kind of like a gift with purchase.
Yeah, and just something that's memorable to keep. And yeah, it's interesting to it's interesting to see e-commerce brands print out physical gift cards because
Yeah.
we had Steph from Cadence on the podcast earlier, and I know that they did that last year where they printed out like a
With
gift
the
card
flip
book.
book.
Yeah, which I think I was just like,
which was a
wow.
huge success too.
And so we've really come full circle here that a digitally native brand is selling things that you get shipped to that are like redeemable. I just thought that was very funny. I think we're at the time where like NFTs are going to be the cool thing this year that everybody is doing next year. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out. And I agree with you. I think people underestimate, especially in December, just people need to buy shit. Like they just need to purchase. They don't really necessarily need a deep discount at this point because they're in crunch time. Mm-hmm. And content is just such a good way to just naturally facilitate that. Where I previously ran a similar thing where it was like 7 days of Christmas in the middle of December, and it's so shocking how without any offer in it, how well those messages do.
Yeah, no, totally. And especially the other thing I think too is like people are so focused on only selling their own products, but they forget like, if I create a listicle of the 25 products to buy and if I'm like a Bala Bangles or Bala Weights brand, there's so many brands around that ecosystem that would play so well with Bala, but not be competitive. I can put up my own gift guide and not only attract traffic for myself, but also 25 other brands that I could even throw an affiliate link into. And if I have a lot of traffic, that might make an extra, 10, 20, 30 grand in affiliate revenue.
Yeah. And then it's one of those ideas of like, hey, feel free to steal this as well, as long as you include us.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, it's a great way to just keep the cycle going.
Exactly.
So I know that you're incredibly busy, so just be conscious of time. I like to ask everybody similar questions in wrapping up. So my first question is, what's one piece of content you would highly recommend that everybody listening consume? Could be any type of content. The only rule is it can't be your own.
I would say check out David Perel's website. Some of his essays around consumer psychology, around consumer habits, just even around the psychology of how people think and people and how people react to things, I think is fascinating, especially when applied in the world of marketing.
Very cool. Okay. I'll definitely check that out. I love like Kahneman and a lot of that type of stuff. So I'm very interested in reading that. I also just shamelessly asked this question for ideas for my reading list. Second question would be, if you could go back to Nik, who was just starting out, hustling to get those first couple roles, what's one lesson that you'd impress upon yourself that if you did it all again, the second time you had it right from the start?
Oh, I would probably start building an audience much earlier, simply for the fact that when you build an audience, you have to put content out of your own. And when you do that, you just naturally attract very smart people. And I think that's been, most of the peers that I have in this industry or a lot of the smart people I've met is simply because they found me through something that I put out. And it could be, the C-levels of the largest companies in the world, all the way down to just people in the startup world that I idolize. And, I wish I'd started that earlier because I've met some amazing people along the way and it should have happened earlier. So I would say, basically make an attempt to build an audience early on.
Okay. Like for your personal brand?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I'll put a strong second behind that one. That's been huge as well. If you were sitting in my seat, if you were interviewing Nik Sharma, what should we have talked about? What did I miss?
What should we have talked about? I love talking about cold emailing.
Okay. When we do the B2B version. Well, actually, let's quickly talk about that. How should a brand be cold emailing whoever you think they should? Who should brands be cold emailing?
I think creators. I think, not enough brands love to aspire to work with creators and work with influencers, but they just never send the message. And a lot of times when the topic comes up, they're always like, well, what do we say? Or how do we reach out to them? Or how do we get in contact with them? Or, how do we get them to respond? And it's literally as simple as reading the bio in their email that says, for inquiries, email here. And, if they're a creator who is too big to manage their own inbox, they always have somebody managing their inbox. And one trick I learned is basically you want to send an email that gets either a yes, no, or a talk to this person as a response. So you basically want your email to aim to get one of those 3 responses. And that's essentially how you work with creators. But I think brands don't cold email creators enough. And creators are really the ones today that hold a lot of the power, right? Like you see somebody like Emily Mariko, who just recently went viral on TikTok. I guarantee you, if she starts working with a brand and talking about why that product fits so well into her morning routine or her evening routine, like that brand's sales are going to go through the roof. But no brand has reached out to her yet.
Well, hopefully by the time that this episode airs, you've already done all the business development you want on that specific with that specific influencer. So my second to last question is, who's someone else that we should have on the show? Who's someone else that like you've been wanting to give a shout out to that has a lot of great points to talk about?
Probably Moiz Ali, the founder of Native. He's just an absolute genius and just a very, very deliberate thinker. He understands how people work and how the world works, and he's just a very smart guy.
Yeah, and based on the other stuff I've seen him, very candid as well. Which
very
is
candid.
Very refreshing for someone who's had major exits like he has.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, my last question for you. If anybody wants to learn more about yourself or Sharma Brands, where should they head?
Yeah, so my website's nik.co, nik.co. Sharma Brands is just sharmabrands.com, but the easiest place is probably on Twitter. I'm at Mr. Sharma on Twitter.
Cool. Well, we really appreciate the time, Nik. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to another week's episode of the Messenger Mastermind podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with another e-commerce marketer. And always let us know what you think down in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe. If you're looking for cutting edge tactics and the resources that we rely on to run our businesses, sign up for our newsletter. We'll include a link down below. As always, stay confident, connect with your customers, and keep crushing it.